Chapter 25, The Queen's Message. I thought we were pretty famous before the interview, but I was wrong. It was only after we became headline news that I found out what being famous was really like. Wherever we went, Tom and Michael and Josie and Ahmet and me were waved at and smiled at and patted on the head and given a thumbs up by lots of people we didn't know. People at the bus stop on the street would run up to us and say things like, "God bless you," and "We're all behind you, Ahmet," and "I just signed the petition. Parliament's going to listen to us, you'll see." Even Mr. Bannock, who owned the newsagents near the school bus stop, was famous for hating children, ran out whenever he saw us and gave us each a chocolate egg for free. And not just for a day, but for a whole week. But as exciting as it was to be famous and to be friends with the most famous refugee boy in the world, what happened a few days later was even more surprising. On Wednesday morning, just 6 days after we had done the interview, we arrived at school, ready to play football, but couldn't find Ahmet anywhere. When the bell began to ring, we headed straight to class, but when we got to the classroom, he wasn't there either. Neither was Mrs. Hemsey. "He's probably just late," shrugged Josie, as we sat down, but Ahmet was never late. Ever late. I looked over at Mrs. Khan and wondered if I should ask her, but she was getting the class to sit down. She looked happier and couldn't stop smiling, even when she was telling Clarissa off for being late. After registration, Mrs. Khan said that Mrs. Bonneville was going to take the first period today as she had something to do. Then she came over to me and Josie and Michael and Tom and told us to come with her. "Are we in trouble?" whispered Tom as we followed Mrs. Khan down the corridor. "But we haven't done anything, have we?" whispered Josie. I didn't say anything. Me and Michael just looked at each other. Mrs. Khan knocked on Mrs. Sanders' door and waited for her "come in" before she pushed it open. The first person we saw was Ahmet. He was perched on a chair. His face looked surprised and serious and happy all in one go. Sitting on one side of him was Miss Hemsey, whose cheeks were pinker than I'd ever seen them, and on the other were two men. They gave me a wide smile. For a moment I couldn't remember how I knew them, and then Tom gave a gasp. "It's the Queen's Guards!" he cried out, punching me in the arm. He was right. They really were the Queen's Guards, except they were dressed in suits and didn't look so giant because they weren't wearing their tall black hats. As we walked in, they stood up and gave a salute. Josie squealed in delight, and Mike was so excited he shook hands with both of them at the same time. I looked over at Ahmet, who, on seeing that we knew the guards, was now smiling at them fully. Come in," said Mrs. Sanders, waving us to our seats and peering over her glasses at us. "Children, these gentlemen have a very special message to give you," said Mrs. Sanders. "Certainly do," said Lieutenant Kungu. "It gives me great pleasure to present you with this very special message from Her Majesty the Queen." He took an envelope from the inside of his coat and held it up, and seeing as how the greatest idea in the world was your idea, "How about you open it?" he asked, and held the envelope out to me. It was large and square and cream and had the curliest writing on it I'd ever seen. As I took it, everyone crowded round me to stare at it. I turned it over. On the back was a large blob of red candle wax. It looked like it had been split accidentally, but then there was the E11R stamped in the middle of it, so it must have been done on purpose. "Go on," whispered Josie, and Ahmet and Michael and Tom nodded. I carefully peeled off the wax blob and pulled out the letter. The writing was so curly and scratchy, and I was so nervous that I couldn't read the words. Seeing me struggle, Mrs. Khan came and stood behind me. I gave her the letter so she could read it out loud, and this is what it said. "Dearest children, Lieutenant Chris Taylor and Second Lieutenant Walter Kungu were so kind to inform me of your brave, although slightly dangerous, actions undertaken on behalf of your refugee friend Ahmet. I have now also received a letter you had written to me on the subject of beforehand. Thank you for the very colourful envelope and the lovely stamps. Purple is quite my favourite colour. I was very sorry to hear farmer's client. I've heard of many little boys and girls like him. Thanks to your brave actions, lots of people from all over the world are working together to try and locate his family. I know they will all be trying their very best, and I look forward to hearing of their safe arrival to the United Kingdom, or Queendom, as you so nicely put it, soon. My lieutenant tells me that you had brought tea and biscuits and gifts in the hope of sharing with me. That was a lovely idea. I am unfortunately scheduled to go on a small tour across Britain this week, but when I get back in a fortnight's time, I should like nothing better than to invite you all to have tea with me at the palace. Until then, I must ask that you please do not go running after any more soldiers. It is awfully dangerous, and I am most relieved that you are not hurt. Any letter addressed to me will always reach me. I do like receiving mail, especially one so beautifully decorated and written with such care. With my fondest best wishes, Elizabeth R., 92 years old. After Mrs. Khan had read it out loud for us and Mrs. Hemsley had finished telling Ahmet what the letter said, we all sat in silence. I guess there are just some things that even grown-ups don't have words for. A message from the Queen is one of them.